Hello.
Good evening, John. This is Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands. How are you?
Fine. Hi, Michael. I'm glad to be with you and your audience.
Whoa, it's great to have you back, my friend. I was just telling everybody a little bit about you and telling them that you're amongst my top researchers when it comes to this topic. So I appreciate it.
Well, that's an honor. Thanks so much, Michael.
Absolutely. So, John, where would you like to start tonight?
There's the latest news we have is from the Atacama Large Meter Submillimeter Array Telescope in Chile. It's the largest telescope on planet Earth. It's a radio telescope capable of detecting not only visible light, but, as you know, light is just one particular frequency spectrum, portion of the frequency band of all electromagnetic energy. Radio waves are also the same identical type of electromagnetic energy as light. And gamma rays are also the same type of electromagnetic energy. The only difference is that they all vibrate or oscillate at different frequencies. That is the different number of cycles per second. So because this telescope is a radio telescope, it's able to detect not only visible light, but sub-visible light, such as infrared, which is what Planet X emits right now. And this is why it's so key. Not only is it capable of sighting distant objects, but it's also able to see non-light emitting objects. Well, the Atacama Large Meter Submillimeter Array, extending more than 3 miles high into the sky in Chile, has just reported that they have detected what is very possibly Planet X. And the diabolical ruling elite are quite upset. They don't know what to do. They've always known that somebody was going to blow the lid off of their secret. They're, in fact, the diabolical ruling elite. There have been reports from credible, reputable newspapers, such as the London Daily Mail, that the elite are going underground. And these reports have been coming out throughout this year of 2015. So we know things are happening. They're getting ready for a war. A war is always cooked up whenever there is something catastrophic about to happen, such as their planned financial collapse.
John, I'm going to leave you you just keep going ahead with this. I got to leave the mic for a few minutes. I kind of got a flood in the other room I need to take care of.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, please, I hope everything works out well for you.
I'll be right back. All right.
All right.
But go right ahead.
Okay, so we see the signs all around us that something drastic is about to happen. And we should not be worried. If we have trust in God, we should now prepare calmly, and because I expect, and many observers who have been studying the situation of not only Planet X, but the world affairs and the cataclysms of the precipices that we appear to be at right now in terms of world politics, the world economy, world war, social upheaval, etc. So we should be preparing for dislocations in our civilizations, such as loss of electrical power. That possible loss of electrical power over major regions of the earth has been discussed and has been of great concern to many people. Ted Koppel, the famous news reporter. Of course, news reporters who are currently in the news cannot be relied upon because their speeches and thoughts are controlled. However, people like Ted Koppel, who have long since retired, they can speak out. And Ted Koppel has written a book warning that we can expect widespread and long protracted power outages. So we should get prepared for that now. Planet X has been sighted. I'm quite sure. I mean, I intend to try to go through, in the limited time we have, the vast array of evidence that we have, showing that indeed this huge brown dwarf star has been detected, not only now but in the past, and is naturally, understandably being pulled in by our sun's great gravitational force field. Our sun is like a celestial fisherman. Our sun's mass is incredibly great. Our sun's mass is equivalent to nearly 1/3 of a million Earth masses. And as we know, according to our own experience every day with gravity, and according to Sir Isaac Newton's universal law of gravitation, the greater the mass of a body, the greater its gravitational pull. So this is why Planet X is coming in. It's not an accident. It doesn't happen to be accidentally coming in. It is a brown dwarf star, of which many are out there in deep space. And this particular brown dwarf star has gotten close enough to our solar system that it has impinged on Earth's, on our solar system's distant outlying borders of our solar system's gravitational force field. And as you know, when an object gets within a force field, whether it be a gravitational force field or a magnetic force field, that object is going to be pulled in and it will be accelerated, which is happening now. So this has been expected. I have studied this subject, and many others have studied this subject of Planet X for 15 years or more. I would say the first time I heard about it was in 2002, and I had a spiritual awakening. You know, it was an intuition spiritually, I believe from God, that this is true. This Planet X, even though I knew nothing about it, entering a large body, entering our solar system, which would cause gravitational molestations of Earth at distances of several million miles away as it passes by. I had realized intuitively that this was true, and without having studied it. But then the more I studied it, the more I realized from a scientific and logical basis of study, it is indeed true. And the more you study it, the more you realize, the more sounder your belief becomes. There are so many fields of evidence that show us, all pointing, converging, agreeing, overlapping, intersecting one another, indicating that this brown dwarf star is indeed coming into our solar system. There is the field of the Bible. Not only the Holy Bible, but other religious texts have prophesied a large object, a great devastation coming into our solar system, wreaking havoc upon planet Earth. That's the religious aspect of the evidence. There's also the scientific aspect of it. Scientifically, this object, I can take you back to the prime evidence supporting this, the belief that this object exists and it's indeed being pulled in by our sun, and that is the launching by our U.S. government in conjunction with the government of the Netherlands and Great Britain in 1983, nearly a third of a century ago, where they were launching this infrared astronomical satellite. And I have the New York Times landmark report on the launching of that satellite. At that time, they were not muzzled. The astronomers and astrophysicists of that day were actually proud to declare to the world that they were launching this infrared, because infrared, this object this telescope was designed to detect infrared light, not visible light. And they were proud to herald the launching of it in the New York Times article. I have it right in front of me. And it's a very long article, but it's extremely informative. What they're saying in the article is that then in January 30th, 1983 to be exact, the infrared astronomical satellite was being launched, quote, to detect the long-sought Planet X. So they actually were free to use the term Planet X. Welcome back, Michael.
I have one of those refrigerators that apparently is smart, I guess, and well, it has a water compartment where it'll give you water. Well, it was giving water, all right. I thought I heard something, and I wasn't sure. I'm glad I caught it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Glad it worked out okay for you.
So we're good, because if I didn't catch it in time, it would have been coming downhill to the studio shortly.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I heard so. It's all good now. I did
Great.
a super speedy cleanup, and here we are. So continue.
Okay. Well, anyway, so in this New York Times, you know what I'm going to do for credibility? I'm going to read some clips from it, but I don't want to take too much time because I know there's so many avenues or channels of fields of information that we can talk about that all converge to indicate that this brown dwarf star is indeed entering our solar system. So I'll just touch on this.
Okay.
This is Sunday, January 30th, 1983. I have the actual photocopy of the article, which I posted on the internet. It's widely available, so that people cannot, skeptics cannot say, well, that's just you made up the text of it, but where's the actual article? I have it photocopied with a photograph in the article of U.S. and Dutch technicians preparing the infrared astronomical satellite before its launch in January of 1983. United Press International from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I'll just read a bit. The title is January 30th, 1983, Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X by John Noble Wilford of the New York Times. Quote, something out there beyond the farthest reaches of the known solar system seems to be tugging at Uranus and Neptune. Some gravitational force keeps perturbing the two giant planets, causing irregularities in their orbits. The force suggests a presence far away and unseen, a large object that may be the long-sought Planet X. So what they're saying is that there's a gravitational pull on the outer gas giants, Uranus and Neptune, and they knew, astronomers know, that only a large body could cause the irregularities or perturbations or pluckings out of their orbital paths of these large outer planets, Uranus and Neptune. Mm-hmm. So they knew there must be a body out there. They couldn't see it, but incidentally, a year before that, back in the a couple of years before 1983, in the 1970s, I also have a New York Times article that shows that they also went out to look for it. This was their first venture, the U.S. government's first venture into space to try to detect this object. They've been very concerned about it for decades and very quiet about it, secretive.
And I'll point out as well, seeing someone brought it up in the chat, that yes, back in 1983, I was in my science class at John Marshall High School. Mr. Freeman was my teacher, so if anyone wants to go look it up or something. But we got magazines, little thin paperback type magazines that would come in every week, and he would hand them out to us, and we were to pick an article, something in there, and do an essay on it. I happened to, that week, see the Planet X stuff. And it talked about how a satellite, a Russian satellite, had gone off course and actually got a glimpse of this thing, that it was partially in our solar system. And that's what I read. And they talked about how it can have life on it and this and that. And it was it was really big, but it was Earth-like. And I mean, I remember reading about this thing, and they called it Planet X. And then I didn't hear no more about it. And that's what it said in that magazine. It talked about it being, like this satellite went out of orbit and accidentally caught it.
And that was in 1983, that report.
Yes.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
right, exactly. That's about 1983, right after the New York Times article. That's when the NSA, the diabolical ruling elites, organ of deceit and control, called the National Security Agency, the spy agency, controls all the other agencies of the government, and they muzzled NASA. They muzzled the National Aeronautics and Space Administration and told them not to talk about it anymore. This was soon after this article was published that I'm reporting on now from the New York Times, and that's why you heard very little about it, although a few major news publications did put out reports which I have collected. I didn't collect them all because there were several others, but I did get one that was sort of sneaked by the censors in 1984, and that was from the third largest news magazine in the United States, U.S. News and World Report, where they stated, again, they restated the discovery of Planet X in this 1984 U.S. News and World Report article that I have. So there have been reports, and we could see, our common sense tells us that when a subject is stifled by the diabolical ruling elite, then we know that there's something happening, something serious behind that suppressed story. We know there's more to it. There's something there that they don't want us to do not want the public to know about. And of course, it's logical because the diabolical ruling elite, their main interest is not only wealth and power. Also power goes along with controlling the people, controlling their thoughts, manipulating their thoughts so that they can continue to perpetrate their evil unimpeded, unopposed. And that requires lies upon lies. And one form of a lie is the omission of truth. You just omit the truth, vital truth.
Yeah.
So this is more evidence to show us that they've covered up the truth, and therefore there's a very serious subject that is being covered up. When you realize their motive behind the cover-up, it becomes obvious. When this object comes in, they all know this because they have the greatest scientists that money can buy in the U.S. government. And they know that when this object comes in, and their studies show that it will not hit the Earth. It will pass by Earth, maybe as close as several million miles away. Why? Because it's on its way to its gravitational rendezvous with our sun. It will not strike the sun. It has come in, incidentally, this brown dwarf star has come in at regular intervals throughout the past. And incidentally, that brings us to another field of evidence proving that this Planet X exists, and that is the periodicity, the regularity of the intrusion of this object into our solar system. Every 36.5 centuries, almost like clockwork, chronological clockwork, every 36.5 centuries, and we can talk about the geological evidence showing that the great catastrophes were inflicted upon the entire planet Earth every 36.5 centuries. But getting back to now we're jumping back to the field of scientific astronomical evidence that this object, this brown dwarf star, exists and is indeed being pulled in to pass by Earth and cause great gravitational molestation of Earth's surfaces as it passes by Earth several million miles away on its gravitational rendezvous with our sun. And that is, I'm still working on this 1983 New York Times landmark report titled Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X, which talks about the launching of the infrared astronomical satellite, which was specifically commissioned to do just that, to find this object. and reverting back to an earlier history before 1983. I'm looking at another New York Times article, which I also photocopied from my archives in my county library. And this is New York Times, Saturday, June 19th, 1982, over a year before the 1983 New York Times article. And I'm just going to read a little bit of that. Spacecraft, title, Spacecraft May Detect Mystery Body in Space. From Sunnyvale, California, June 18th, United Press International. Quote, a pair of American spacecraft may help scientists detect what could be a 10th planet or a giant object billions of miles away, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration said Thursday. You see, NASA was free to speak about it way back in 1982. Continuing, scientists at the Space Agency's Ames Research Center said the two spacecraft, Pioneers 10 and 11, which are already farther into space than any other man-made objects, might add to knowledge of a mysterious object believed to be beyond the solar system's outermost known planets. The Space Agency said that persistent irregularities in the orbits of Uranus and Neptune suggest some kind of mystery object is really there, with its distance depending on what it is. Okay, so that's enough of that article because of the limited time that we have. But you see, they sent up the Pioneer space probe, and what they were doing with, according to this article here, I'll give you a further insight, is the space probe, Pioneer 10, was sent up in the calculated to go into the deep regions of our solar system, as far out as you can imagine, and never return on an endless journey. This Pioneer 10 was sent on a trajectory that would pass very close to where the scientists and astronomers have calculated this mysterious pulling object was located. And their rationale was quite understandable, logical, and that is, if this space probe, Pioneer 10, got close enough to this huge gravitationally pulling object, well then this object would pull the Pioneer space probe slightly off of its trajectory, and that would constitute evidence that indeed this object, this gravitational body, was out there. And that's what happened. Now, I'm telling you that's what happened, even though they did not report it. To my knowledge, they did not admit the results of the Pioneer 10 space probe mission. They, of course, they're not going to tell you, well, yeah, we were looking for... Well, they told you this was wonderful. This is wonderful that at that time, the NSA had not been crafty enough to muzzle the NASA. And so NASA was telling us, yeah, we're looking for Planet X. That's what the purpose of this Pioneer 10 space probe is. But to my knowledge, later on, it took a long time for that space probe to get out there, because it's traveling in the solar system, very deep into the solar system.
And John, it's a little early, but we're going to take a call. We've got a call that came in. Unknown number. What's your first name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going, Mike? How you been? Hey, John, my name's Jake, and I just wanted to interject a few things while you're telling the story about Planet X. The brown dwarf star is named Nemesis, okay?
Yes.
It's not Planet X. Planet X is the planet that is coming through with it.
There are many names for it. To my knowledge, Nemesis is just another name for Planet X.
No.
Etc.
Nibiru and Planet X are two different things than Nemesis, which is the brown dwarf star. It's a mini solar system that's coming through our solar system. Now, Planet X / Nibiru is the planet that comes within our orbit, close enough to us to cause all these disturbances you're talking about. They're two different distinct things. One is a planet. One is a star, a brown dwarf star. Okay, you gotta do the research, brother.
All right. Well, thank you for the call. John, what say you?
Well, I disagree with Jake on that point. From what my studies show that indicate that Nemesis, Nibiru, Planet X, they're all one and the same. It's a brown dwarf star. But anyway, we agree. Jake and I agree pretty much on the most essential point, and that is there's a large body, a huge body that's being pulled in by our sun, and that's really what matters. You know, when the great Earth catastrophes occur, when as this object passes, it makes its closest passage by planet Earth, several million miles away, and its gravitational pull begins to massage Earth's crust and Earth's underlying viscous mantle, and land masses begin to sink and become seabeds, and seabeds rise, are pulled up and become land masses, new land masses. It really won't matter to anybody whether it's a brown dwarf star or whether it's another object that's accompanying it. People won't care. So the main issue is, yes, we have a brown dwarf, we have a massive object, and again, this is a brown dwarf star. According to, let me try to clarify that point that Jake was making. According to the knowledge that I have from, go ahead.
I just want to ask really quick, that's something that's always puzzled me. If it is a brown dwarf star, how come they call it Planet X? It was called a planet. It's been called different names. It was because it was so far out and distant. Let's go back to the 1970s when there were indications that it existed due to the perturbations in our outer planets. That's the first sign that we've ever had, and those indications are you can. It's hard to imagine that those indications of perturbations or pluckings in the paths of the outer planets, Uranus and Neptune, were noticed by astronomers as long ago as the early 1800s, nearly 2 centuries ago. So at that time, they didn't know what it was. I mean, they figured there's a large body out there. They called it a planet because that's what they knew in those times. In those days, I mean, it was so nebulous and so far out, all they could see was the gravitational footprint of this object. So they called it a planet, but it's a misnomer to some extent. But it's really not a misnomer. Because if you look at Jupiter is a gas giant. If Jupiter were just a little bit larger, Jupiter would be a brown dwarf star. Okay, so brown dwarf stars can be called planets. Jupiter is almost on the brink of becoming a brown dwarf star, according to its size. It has all the characteristics of a dwarf star, but it's called a planet, isn't it? I mean, we've always called Jupiter a planet. Well, that's true. Now, speaking of Jupiter, do you think that in the future it could still ignite into a brown dwarf? Maybe that's the sitting, nemesis, if you will.
Probably not, because, well, first of all, it's hard for Jupiter to gain enough mass. In order to ignite a dwarf star, a smoldering brown dwarf star, has to pick up enough objects and suck them into its center gravitationally and build up its mass enough so that the pressure caused by all this mass converging and aggregating upon itself will cause such intense pressure that nuclear fusion will occur, and that's what the energy from the nuclear fusion is what creates the light and the ignition, just as our sun does. Our sun is a star. It's an adult star, and it's the same as Jupiter, actually. The only difference is our sun has much more mass, many more bodies have aggregated and clumped together to form our sun, and that's why our sun is igniting, because it's much larger than Jupiter, and Jupiter is smoldering. It's actually creating some nuclear fusion, but it's not enough to create visible light. So that's what the whole bottom line is. The greater the mass, the more it ignites with visible light. So I don't think Jupiter's ever going to get that large unless it's something large, another large body really collides with Jupiter, and now it becomes a much greater body. Let's hope that doesn't happen, because Jupiter's mass is critical to shepherding the planets in our solar system, including Earth. And if Jupiter were not as large as it is, and on the same orbital path that it is, it would not keep Earth in its necessary quasi-circular orbit around our sun. And we would be in serious trouble. In fact, there's been speculation that a rogue planet, such as Planet X, could disturb Earth's orbital path and make it less circular and more eccentric, more elliptical. And if that happens, we're all dead.
And it could do this without hitting the Earth.
Without hitting, exactly. In fact, I have videotaped, fortunately, it's videotaped a Weather Channel, a great Weather Channel documentary from the Weather Channel series titled Forecasting the End. And one of the episodes in that I have videotaped, I have it on DVD, and I put it up on my Vimeo channel. And it's titled Rogue Planets. And what they're showing you with wonderful graphics and scientists explaining the phenomena, that Jupiter, and I don't believe it's an accident. I know that God has created all this association of planets and the relationship of planets perfectly, so that Earth would revolve around the sun with rather circular motion and give us livable conditions. So I know that this is by God, but what they're telling us is that Jupiter shepherds the orbital paths of the planets because of its great gravitational pull. It's at just the right distance, and it has just the right mass to create just the right amount of gravitational pull on Earth. Now, they say if a rogue planet comes in, a very large one, and I think they're alluding to Planet X. In fact, what I pointed out something, is a subtle portion of this broadcast on Forecasting the End, Rogue Planets, where they have astronomers showing what they have detected to be a brown dwarf star. And they're saying this is the rogue planet that we've detected, and they're alluding to Planet X, I believe. You can see it in the Vimeo report that I have posted on my Vimeo channel. So they're saying if a rogue planet comes in, we're in trouble, folks, because it's going to pull Earth's orbital path from a circular shape to an eccentric elliptical shape, which means that Earth, during one portion of the year, Earth will come too close to the sun, so close that Earth will become extremely hot. Life will begin to die out. And then during the other seasons, as Earth makes its eccentric revolution around the sun and pulls away from the sun too far away, then Earth will abruptly become so cold that life is threatened, and much of life will die.
It would
it would be an annual cycle of cold and hot extremes, so extreme that life will die off rather quickly.
Well, it would probably tear the atmosphere apart, I'm guessing. And wouldn't this happen wouldn't we be in trouble if any of the planets were knocked out of their orbit? Because aren't they all kind of depending on one another?
Yes, that's true. That's very true. For example, there's scientists have studied, the great Immanuel Velikovsky studied this, and he talked about Venus being a rather new planet coming into our solar system around 4,000 years ago. And that was just about the time of Planet X's entry. Our evidence shows us that Planet X entered around 36 and a half centuries ago, pretty close to 4,000 years ago. And at that time, this object, Planet X, is like a shotgun with pellets being outlying celestial bodies that it has captured from while coming in from deep space, and it carries them in like a gang, like a bee swarm. I liken it to a bee swarm surrounding a beehive, Planet X being a beehive. And turned out that, according to Dr. Emanuel Velikovsky, that Venus was one of the large comets that was one of the gravitationally captured bees of this Planet X around 4,000 years ago. And Venus came in and was captured by the sun and then became a new member of our solar system. Now, before that happened, there was a different orbital relationship between the planets to Earth. And before that happened, before that great celestial occurrence 4,000 years ago, Mars used to make its orbital passages very close to Earth, so close that it would cause upheavals on Earth. And it was around, trying to think now. No, I guess there was some other cometary intrusions that came later than 4,000 years ago, but they're also related to Venus because Venus changed its path. It took several hundred years to make its orbital adjustment into its path.
Something kicked Mars' butt too.
I'm sorry, what?
I say something kicked Mars' butt too.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, that was speculated by Dr. Velikovsky to be Venus itself, which came by Mars, and its gravitational pull actually sucked the moisture, the water from Mars's atmosphere and its surface. I mean, we all know that there are what looks like riverbeds on Mars. I haven't studied the subject real deeply, so I'm not a great expert on that, but passingly, it's true that the scientific evidence shows that Mars had its atmosphere pull off. I mean, atmospheric water pull off, and go back to the time of the Great Flood, which was, again, I'll talk about this later, but that was 2 Planet X orbits ago. That would be 2 times 36.5 centuries ago. Each Planet X incursion with its gang of cometary bees surrounding it, occurring every 36.5 centuries, because that's how comets operate. This object is like a brown dwarf star planet operating on a cometary orbit. So it's got characteristics of not only a dwarf star, but also a planet, and also motions quite like a comet.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, going back to 2 Planet X orbits ago, that's 2 times 36.5 centuries ago, which would take you back to around 5,300 BC, 5,300 BC. The geologists Pittman and Ryan, I believe it's Pitmann and Ryan, Ryan, they have made a great discovery in recent years, and that is that they believe the Great Flood of Noah's Day occurred around 5,300 BC. That's 2 Planet X orbits ago. They don't know anything about Planet X, which makes it even more credible, because when somebody doesn't know anything about Planet X, then you cannot accuse them. They cannot be accused by skeptics of being biased toward the Planet X theory, because they don't know anything about it.
Oh, that's right. I've heard about it for a long, long time. I mean, when I first heard about it, I didn't know all the stuff I know now about it. I thought of it as just this happy place we might end up one day. Then I hear it mentioned later as this object that's going to cause problems, and I says, well, damn it, 83 I remember hearing about it. So I've always given it some credence, and that's why I cover it, and that's why I'm waiting for somebody to say, hey, there it is, because I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I just don't know where.
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, right now, this is a key time in history for the human race, because the Atacama Large Meter Submillimeter Array of radio telescopes, 66 radio telescopes set together in an array, has detected radios of electromagnetic energy radiating, transmitted back, radiated from sublights, portion of the electromagnetic spectrum. And it has detected what they say is Planet X. They believe it's very likely Planet X. They're trying to be scientifically conservative in their response, in their report, which is quite responsible of them, because that's the way scientists should operate. When they see something, they think they know it's Planet X. They cannot declare that it is, but they can say it might be. Let's check it out. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, yeah, I learned my lesson the hard way, too. There's been a few times in my radio career that I thought that, hey, this is it, and I passed it around, and, it came back to bite me, although I was, man enough to admit that I made a mistake, and others out there don't.
Well, we all do. I mean, you've shown that you're human. I've made mistakes, too. So, but we continue on, and that is what human nature is. The honest form of human nature should be about is you try your best to be truthful and to the best of your ability, and you recognize your own mistakes. Those who ignore their mistakes don't have the integrity, I guess, or they have too much pride to admit it, and it's a shortcoming of all of us, I guess.
Exactly. Hey, John, we've got a couple good questions in the chat, and it'd be nice if they private message them to me because they are good questions. One says, makes you wonder why a comet doesn't just keep on going. Surely the pull of the sun, etc., isn't that strong so far out, but I could be wrong. So that's a good question. How come how much pull does the sun have on how far out? Can it affect these objects?
Okay. Comets very often come close to the sun. I mean, that happens all the time. They come into our solar system. Some of them get so close that they actually crash into the sun. I mean, we've seen that with the SOHO satellite in space, which sits out there and constantly monitors the sun. You see these, looks like discs or frisbees flying into the sun. You'll see this from time to time. Yeah. And these are comets that are actually got sucked right into the sun. Some of them graze the side of the sun and are destroyed. So it happens quite a bit. Now, it's a function, the amount, how far in a comet will come toward the sun is a function of the velocity of the comet, which means it's related to its momentum, and the mass of the comet. So you take the mass times the velocity, and in physics, mass times velocity is equal to momentum. So it's the mass of the comet, its velocity at the time, all of these things, and of course the velocity is determined by its distance from the sun at that any given time, and because the distance creates a gravitational. The distance is a function of the gravitational pull on the sun, and the greater the gravitational pull, the greater the acceleration, the greater velocity, etc. So it's a variable thing. I'm sorry, go ahead,
and oh no, it's quite all right. And there's a kind of a follow-up on this. That first question was from Bear. He said not quite a question, but I thought it was worth bringing up. JH says, why hasn't Venus and Mercury been sucked into the sun or burnt like charcoal?
Well, because, okay.
Oh, go ahead. No,
they are revolving around the sun. Earth would crash into the sun too, except that Earth is revolving around the sun, and it's a centrifugal force. That outward centrifugal, fuge, from the word fugitive or fleeing, centrifugal force, which is a force which is directed away from the center of an object traveling in a circular motion, that prevents any object, such as a planet, from being pulled in by the centripetal or center-seeking force of the the center pulling object, such as the sun. So you have the centripetal force of the sun pulling the object in, and then you have at the same time, coincidentally, you have the centrifugal or outward fleeing force of an object. As you know, when you're driving your car and you make a sharp left turn, what's going to happen? Or make a fast left turn at 90 degrees,
you're going to fly
your body
right.
is pulled to the right, along the right side of your seat. And this would be centrifugal, an example of centrifugal force pulling away. And that's what prevents the planets from crashing into the sun.
Oh, okay. And now somebody had asked also, he thought Mercury didn't rotate. I didn't know that. Mercury doesn't rotate?
I don't know. I'm not quite sure about that. You know, Earth rotates every 24 hours, and that's what gives us day and night. But while Earth is rotating, it's also revolving around the sun, and it takes roughly 365 days for Earth to make one full revolution around the sun. And each day is one rotation. So it's wonderful how God set up this synchronicity of motion to create a viable life on planet Earth.
It is incredible. It's just absolutely incredible. So you can't deny
it. Cannot be a coincidence. It cannot be. It's just too astounding and too unlikely to be a coincidence.
Yeah, you cannot deny that there's some intelligence somewhere behind this. I mean, and it's not just us, but there's other solar systems out there that I'm sure are just as lively, if not more so.
Well, just imagine how great God is. He would have created maybe countless solar systems and galaxies with life so abundant that we just can't imagine the magnitude and the vast numbers of life forms that are out there. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's just amazing, and it makes you realize that when you stop and think about it, God, according to the people, men who have been contacted by God and who show evidence that they were not crazy, but they were actually given messages from God. These men say that this Creator who spoke to them, perhaps even in thoughts, doesn't even have to be a voice, just thoughts in their mind. They are told that God is trying desperately to get us to recognize His presence and to commune with Him. You know, suppose your father was invisible, and you knew he existed because he kept on putting food on your table every day.
Yeah.
And the dishes got washed somehow, miraculously, and everything was there prepared for you, and yet you knew he was there, but yet you never bothered to even talk to him, even though just because he was invisible. Well, that's how God feels. He feels hurt because he loves us so much. And he's telling us that he is bringing destruction on Earth, and it seems like he's wrathful and angry. But the purpose, he says, is to wake us up to his existence so that he can take us into eternity, take our lives and give us eternal life in this world renewed and far and devoid of all evil, filled with nothing but love and joy, away from this flawed world. He wants to take us, but he has to have us recognize him in order for us to gain entry into this eternal life. So God doesn't want us just to die, go and have our bodies laid out in a funeral parlor, and now you're dead and everybody cries over you, and then they forget you. They just don't talk about you anymore because it's too sad. So you become a forgotten being that's right. Now decaying in the ground. God does not want that to happen. He wants you and I to go on to another eternal life, never-ending life, with a brand new body that will never disintegrate, never age, never become diseased, and cannot be damaged or injured in any way. That's what God promises us in the Scriptures, that we will be resurrected with a new body, indestructible. And if you look at the spirit of the body, or the essence, it is spirit, it's energy, it's like electromagnetic light. Many people of spiritual nature who are not necessarily Christians believe that. They sense that we are energy, that energy exists forever. So this is the purpose for this great destruction that comes on Earth, because if we didn't have these great cataclysms, we would all be fat, dumb, and happy, and we would watch television and enjoy all the goodies of life, and just have vacation and get a job and get old and retire and die. God doesn't want us that. He wants us wants to shake us and wake us.
I don't want that either.
Exactly. So it's an act of love, much more than an act of wrath, that God claims to actually be bringing Planet X upon us. Now, this is a miracle. I'm glad we got off onto this subject here, as I was in the midst of reading a 1983 New York Times article about an hour ago, which I hope to get back to.
Yeah, hold that thought right there. We'll get back to it. We do have to take a break, John. So,
beyond what we see in front of our eyes, and I know that's what drives you and drives me too. What I do to help others is I make it very easy for myself. It's getting harder because I'm donating to a lot of people right now, but what I do is make an easy $5 a month PayPal donation, and I make it automatic so I don't have to remember. Otherwise, I would never remember to make the donation every month. So I go to PayPal and I donate $5, and I just check the box that says make this a monthly donation. And I do that now. I'm up to about 10 different worthy people that I find as reporters and information specialists.
And I
so
appreciate
it's getting up to
that.
be like $50 a month, because I'm donating $5 a month to 10 people, and I made an annual subscription to Late Night in the Midlands also. But that's what I do, and you can urge people to do it. Hey, look, $5 is not, you're not going to notice it. That's like $1.25 a week.
No,
you won't notice it.
That's right. And John, I thank you, and I know you're not just saying that. You do support the ones that support the truth. I've seen you doing it for years, and I appreciate that.
I mean, I don't want to die with money left over, and I want to give it to worthy causes and to spend whatever I have on the truth, which is part of God, because God, one of the aspects of God is truth. And this is more important. I mean, as long as we have enough food to survive on, the truth is what we need to spend our money on. So I just hope that people will realize that, hey, look, it's like being on a ship and trying to deny if that ship is sinking. If you're on the Titanic, if the ship is sinking, trying to deny that it's sinking and to deny that there's water coming in merely because your cabin is warm and the lights are still on. So why not just pull the covers over your head and try to ignore the fact that the ship is sinking?
That's right.
We don't want that to happen with good people around us, good people who are our ship of truth.
Yeah, and the ship really is sinking. I've got actually going to be doing a show, recording a show with Peter Kling on Christmas Eve. And I'll probably run it on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, and he really believes that the end times are here, and that's what he's going to focus on. And I'm I'm going to join him in the conversation. So we're going to do an hour this Christmas Eve based on that. So, I mean, it seems to be, I mean, I even seen, John, I not kid you, I was looking, shopping around for some stuff for the little guys, right? And there's this SpongeBob. I seen this, it was advertised, a Apocalypse SpongeBob playset. I mean, it was literally a playset teaching the kids of the apocalypse and getting ready for it.
Yeah, we see many signs of that in our society around us, in the media. So, indeed, the movies that they've been putting out are trying to give us a message, and very often when the truth is suppressed, those people with higher capabilities in the media will give us information that's fictionalized, give us the truth in fictional forms so that they can bypass the diabolical ruling elite who suppress the truth for their own greedy purposes. So, yeah, we're seeing movies coming out about this. The movie 2012 was perhaps maybe designed to tell people, well, okay, here's an apocalypse that we're saying is going to occur in 2012, and lo and behold, it never happened. So it was just a myth. It's not true. Maybe the purpose of the movie 2012 was to do just that, was to disillusion people. But still, it left an impression. And when people see that now, they're beginning to see this tiny red dot in the sky, first discovered by the Atacama Large Meteor Array in Chile in December of 2015, and now it's 2016, and we're beginning to see a tiny little red glowing dot in the sky, and it gets bigger and bigger as the weeks go by. Well, when they see that, they'll look back to 2012 and say, wait a minute, let me go see that movie now. It's really beginning to mean something to me.
Well,
so I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. And, I look back at some of these older movies, and I see stuff in these movies that now are relevant, very relevant. One was an old Superman movie with Christopher Reeve and Richard Pryor was in it. And they were actually, one of the things he did was took control of a satellite and a weather weapon satellite in space. And at the time you think, ha, 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 right? But now they have this. So it was almost like they were telling us then that they had it. And this was, I think, late 70s, maybe early 80s.
Right, and that old movie now takes on greater significance in regard to current events. So, yeah, that's true. And, should get back to the article.
Sure.
But before I do, I just wanted to say that one of the fields of evidence is the periodicity, the regularity of the return of this object. It's a brown dwarf star, which could be classified as a planet also. There's different names given to it. A brown dwarf star, which it is. A planet, which it is. Mm-hmm. Also, because we know Jupiter has the same makeup as a incipient or a newborn brown dwarf star, and Jupiter is called a planet also. So a gas giant such as Jupiter or brown dwarf called Planet X can also be called planets. But also one other thing is this Planet X, because it travels on a cometary orbit, it's considered a massive comet too. And comets, let me give you an analogy. So, as a former high school physics teacher, I can tell you that the greatest motivation of a teacher is to create a realization in the student's mind, such a realization that student will think, wow, aha, I understand now, I see what he's saying, and it makes sense. That's what the impression I want to bring to the minds of people. And I'm going to try to show them visually what's happening and how we can look back 36 and a half centuries ago and another 36 and a half centuries before that and see geological evidence of great destruction occurring throughout and across planet Earth. And one of the examples to show how this object is periodic like a comet is to explain the theory, and this was given in the past by scientists, and it was also stated in the New Science and Invention Encyclopedia.
Okay.
Of I should remember that. I know I've got it in a book somewhere. New Science and Invention Encyclopedia, somewhat time in the 1987. That's it, the 1987 edition. I could show you the actual photocopy of it. it stated that there was this object, Planet X, and it revolves around two planets, two stars. One is a distant star, billions and billions of miles away. That is our sun's twin sun. And so this object, Planet X, according to the New Science and Invention Encyclopedia, the 1987 edition, which we have a picture of, is that Planet X's brown dwarf star revolves around two suns, a distant dead sun, which no longer lights up, but it's still there in great mass, and our sun. And I liken that to two tennis players. Imagine you're looking at a tennis game on television, and the tennis player in the near court is our sun. The tennis player in the far court is our sun's twin sun, a dead sun many billions of miles away. And the tennis ball is this brown dwarf star, Planet X, that is being batted back and forth by the two tennis players. And if they bat it back and forth at regular intervals, rhythmically, it's very much like what's happening with Planet X. There's a force the tennis player exerts on the ball when he hits the ball that sends that ball out to the far court, and the tennis player back there hits it, exerts another force in the opposite direction to bring it back, and you have a continuing cycle. And if it was regular, like a pendulum, which this object is like a celestial pendulum, the time it takes for it to make one complete cycle from the player in the near court back to the player in the near court again, one complete cycle, would be regular, constant every cycle. And that's what we have with this cometary orbit. This definition of a cometary orbit, and this planet is batted back and forth due to the gravitational pull of each sun. It loops around the sun. It's a phenomenon that it doesn't crash into the sun, but it loops around it, because as it approaches the sun, there's a repulsion force due to their magnetic fields. This is a theory, but it makes sense. And that's why they don't crash, and the brown dwarf star never crashes into the sun. If it crashed into our sun, we'd have serious problems. We would have probably the destruction of planet Earth as a result of the energy that would be released. So we know its object has come in the past many times over the past millennia. So it loops around the sun without destroying the sun. Now, just imagine as the object comes close, it's coming toward the sun, let's say the distant sun, and it's going to not hit it but pass by it. What's going to happen is going to overshoot the sun. When it overshoots the sun, what is that distant sun going to do? It's still pulling on it, but now it's pulling the object back in the opposite direction, because the object has overshot that distant sun, and now that distant sun is still exerting a gravitational pull, but it's a pulling back of the object. So the net effect is the object makes a circular U-turn around the sun and is slingshotted back, just as our lunar module did. And when they went to the moon, or supposedly, or in other space missions where there was a module that was slingshotted around the moon to go back to the Earth, and that's scientifically proven because we've done it already. Our government has done it. So that's how this object makes its regular travel back and forth, like a tennis ball being batted back and forth by two tennis players, analogous to our sun and our Earth sun's distant dead sun. Mm-hmm. Okay, enough of that. That's why it's periodic. Now let's show the proof that it's periodic. 36.5 centuries ago, we have great evidence from various fields indicating that Earth underwent tremendous destruction. We have, first of all, the account from the Bible in the book of Genesis of the Israelites being liberated by God from Egyptian bondage, And there were earth disasters that accompanied it. There were 10 plagues that are described in the Bible. There were a whole variety of different disasters, and we can expect those disasters to occur again on planet Earth. So if you read the book of Exodus, you'll be reading tomorrow's news today. It tells about, first of all, the destruction of the fish in the ocean began dying. That was one of the first signs. Well, what do we have today? We're seeing that now, great die-offs of fish. That was described in the book of Exodus, which geologists tell us occurred around 36.5 centuries ago. First, the fish died off, and then I'm trying to recollect all the various plagues. It was like a litany, a series of disasters. One precipitated another. The fish died off in the ocean, and then as a result, the frog population expanded to a point where it became disastrous. There were frogs everywhere, and of course that would be caused by changing biological conditions in the waters. The oceans turned red. We see red tide today. We see a lot of the signs of those disasters that occurred described in the book of Exodus 36.5 centuries ago. And then following that, there was great diseases that killed the cattle, plagues that occurred. That was part of the whole series, that litany of disasters. So we can expect that to happen, diseases. I think we're seeing it already. And then it got worse to a point where there were bombardments of Earth by meteors. And many of them were electrical. Some of them could have been also by the weather. We have bombardments of Earth due to hailstones, massive hailstones, unprecedented in size. So you could see them on YouTube. You could see them on the Weather Channel. And I've been following the Weather Channel for a long time, and I've videotaped reports of hailstones as large as grapefruits, and they showed it.
They're giving out warnings for this Christmas era. With the weather being so warm, that they expect tornadoes to be kicking up in different places.
That is crazy. You're right. I mean, this is extremely worrisome to see such wild weather. And it's been going on for at least a decade now, because I've got videotape documentation of it from the Weather Channel. And I mean, floods are so horrendous, epic floods, epic droughts. We tend to forget them, but if you look back at the records, I could never go through all the videotapes I have of these disasters. I recall a few. I mean, we're going back like 2005. I remember I have on videotape somewhere in a box of videotapes, 6-hour videotapes, picture of a car hanging from a tree. The car was able to hang from the tree because the river, the water on the dry land in a community got so high that the car floated up to the top of a tree and was hanging there when the water receded.
Well, we had historic floods here in Columbia, South Carolina. Well, pretty much the whole state.
I remember that.
Yeah, we got hammered here. I mean, we had some historic buildings right off over here in Lexington that collapsed because the ground under them had like rivers flowing underneath them, and they just gave out. I mean, I seen houses missing. There's sections of roads still missing here.
That's right.
So yeah, it's
and with the extremes too. We go to the other extreme, where the drought has been so intense in some areas, and I have this on videotape from the Weather Channel also, where the houses were beginning to sink and crumble, and their foundations, because the ground got so dry and parched that it began to contract and crack, and the houses were collapsing. The foundations were breaking up because of this extreme dryness. And then all of a sudden, it changed in Texas. It went from extreme drought to extreme flooding and storms. I mean, it was so. I feel sorry for the people in Texas, and actually everywhere when you stop and think about it. Charleston, South Carolina, that whole area.
And they're still dealing with problems. I mean, it's not over yet. People don't hear much about it now, but I mean, there's still water draining off. It's still continued to rain here. I mean, we've still gotten a lot of rain since then. So, I'm sure the lower part of the state is still dealing in areas, I'm sure, with floodwaters.
Well, that's kind of scary because when you have that much weight from water, Charleston is already an earthquake.
I know.
Right. Earthquake time bomb.
I think about it all the time. We're right on the border of that fault, right? So if that shook, I would certainly feel it.
Yeah, that's why we got to stay attuned to earthquake signs. I believe in California there was a great earthquake that was followed great flooding. So sometimes great flooding is an indication of an earthquake.
I agree with that. There's been plenty of cases where, and I think that it's almost scientifically proven that the water will act as a lubricant. You get too much of it, and the plates shift, and it's on.
Right. It's the lubricating effect of the water, and also the weight.
Yeah.
Tremendous amount of weight. I was seeing a documentary about a dam. Yeah, I remember now. It was somewhere, one of the science channels. This huge dam was holding so much water that it caused the earth to shift and actually precipitated an earthquake.
Yeah. I mean, that happens. A lot of dams gave here, a lot of levees broke here in South Carolina, but the one that didn't was the Lake Murray Dam. Thank God, because if that one had given out, I wouldn't have escaped the floodwaters. A lot of people wouldn't have. Columbia would have been like a small ocean here.
Well, I'm sad to say that we're going to see worsening of these extreme weather disasters, and that's why we have to get prepared. For example, you can't move out of your house. I understand you're stuck there just like I'm stuck in my house. But you can prepare. For example, think about, everybody listening, and tell your friends too, because you have to warn. This is a show the subject that you need to tell others about.
Well, here's the thing, John. I could go anywhere in the country I want right now. The only problem is Autumn's not having it. She wants to stay with family. So, and I don't want to leave either. So I'm with it. I mean, the way I see it, if the man upstairs needs me to leave to survive, then I will get that warning, and hopefully I don't overlook it.
That's right. Keep in contact mentally with God. And it seems difficult to do, but during my day, what I try to do is constantly, and it's difficult too, because there are demonic forces, believe it or not, entities that do not want us to commune with God, which is why most people are unaware of God, because of these demonic entities. We call them fallen angels. I know I'm a scientist, but yet I understand that science is also metaphysical. There's a lot in science that we don't understand. For example, entities that exist in another dimension. Science is now proving that there are other dimensions that exist. And in those dimensions, can be beings and I know there are beings that cannot be seen because they don't have physical attributes. So those entities affect our mind, though, and our spirits, and cause us to be disbelieving. And this is a whole problem with people, man, God's creation, not recognizing their creator. Well, anyway, you're doing the right thing by keeping your mind on God's presence, because you're struggling like a salmon swimming upstream against the demonic barrier, a smoke screen of belief that this God must be here, because why is your heart beating? Your heart would never get that signal, that electrochemical signal to keep it beating. It's like a spark to a spark plug. Without that spark, that piston is not going to fire in your engine, and the car is not going to go. You need that spark, electrochemical spark. Somebody has to determine that it's going to occur.
Well, my heart just beat kind of fast now, because I don't know if everyone heard that, but boy, a plane come awful close. I mean, it was pretty loud. We've got a call here. We've got Ira on the line. Ira, welcome aboard.
Hello, gentlemen. This has been a great conversation tonight so
Thank
far.
you.
Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, I
Yes, I
am.
can.
And
Okay.
did you hear that plane?
I did. Yeah, I heard it. I heard
'Cause-
something. I wasn't sure what it
Because
was.
if you didn't, I won't mention it again. But yeah, it was awful close. Go ahead.
I just wanted to toss in here real quick while you guys were discussing the fracking thing in the water that's being injected and the fact that the earthquakes seem to be related. I can totally agree with that. If you think about things in this way as well, water is like one of the only substances that does not compress. Oil does. So I think that's one of the problems is that when we see earthquakes occur, they tend to be a little bit lighter because the oil is actually compressing and it's acting like more of a shock absorber, whereas a water injection actually acts as more of a solid material, so it causes the earthquakes to be that much worse, basically.
That's a good point. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Ira.
Yeah, you bet. I just thought I'd toss that in there for you guys, and just for kind of sake of knowing.
Yeah, I mean, we should know that because the floods are just horrendous, and
They
they've
are,
been
yeah.
occurring all over the earth. I mean, we forget. It's so easy for us to forget these disasters, flood disasters. But I can, again, because I've been following the Weather Channel, I've got videotapes, and you can go on YouTube and look it up. Australia, the entire continent of Australia was underwater practically just a few years ago, but nobody remembers it now, that great catastrophe. The entire nation of Pakistan, I believe, was underwater, but nobody remembers it. Poland had horrendous flooding, caused great deaths. Nobody remembers that. Portugal, Spain, England. I remember in England there was such floods. It was so disastrous, and it's happened a number of times. So just to let you know that these floods are occurring around the world, and the fact that the water is instrumental, or the weight of the water and the non-compressibility of water is instrumental in causing earthquakes that are going to be precipitated by the flooding. So it's important to know that. The floods, the earthquakes are all related. So this is what we can expect. And Michael, you're in a position now where you don't have to sell your house. I don't have to sell mine. What we need to do is just be alert to disasters and be prepared for them. For example, this brings me to another. This is such a subject with so many ramifications, it's hard to hit on them. But luckily, as we talk, our minds are triggered, our memories are triggered as to various facets of this vast subject. And one facet that comes to mind is the great threat of an East Coast tsunami that will wipe out Charleston, will wipe out me here in New Jersey. Although I'm fortunate, and I feel sorry for others, but I'm fortunate in the sense that Long Island and Staten Island are blocking a lot of that tsunami wave that would come in because I'm in northern New Jersey. But I would want to spend my time warning others that they need to prepare for this East Coast tsunami. I have the documentary from the great scientists, the geologists at the Open College in London, England, Dr. Simon Day and Dr. Bill McGuire, who have warned in documentaries, wonderful documentaries, one of which is called Mega Tsunami. You can look that up on YouTube. Please do, because it's so important. Where they don't even know about Planet X, these geologists, Dr. Day and Dr. McGuire. But they're saying the Cumbre Vieja volcanic mountain is an island on the island of La Palma. It's a mountain which constitutes the entire island of La Palma. It's called the Cumbre Vieja volcanic mountain. And in 1949, a split occurred on the western flank, along the western flank, such that that western flank is completely separated from the mountain proper. And water is building up in that extinct volcano, such that when a volcano begins to erupt, the heat from the magma will definitely, they tell us it will definitely heat up the water that is trapped in those many, many fissures within the crack, the separation of the western flank. And when that water heats up, as you know, water pressure is unstoppable. Steam will be created and will push out, open, break open, separate that already separated 500 billion ton western flank. That's what they tell us the weight of it is. 500 billion tons western flank of the Cumbria Vieja in the Canary Islands off the west coast of Africa in the Atlantic Ocean. It will slide into the ocean, and they're telling us the entire scenario because they've done it in microcosm. They've done in laboratory experiments, small-scale experiments with large objects sliding into a large body of water in a laboratory, and they've calculated that the tsunami that would result, the first splash of that 500 billion ton western flank into the Atlantic Ocean would be like the height of 2 Empire State Buildings stacked one atop the other. Then it would level out because in the deep ocean the wave height will level out, and there will be not much threat to shipping in those deep oceans, but it will travel at a speed, and this is all their calculations, not mine, at a speed of 450 miles an hour, which is faster than a jet, and it would reach faster than a passenger jet. This wave would reach the east coast of the Americas in 8 hours. It would also reach England and Portugal and Spain, in less than 8 hours. When it reaches the east coast, its height, they estimate, would be, I think it's at least 30 stories high. And it would devastate and wipe out, depending upon the terrain, it would wipe out areas inland as far as 12 miles inland along the east coast of the U.S. That means Boston, New York would be wiped out, destroyed. Charleston, Norfolk, Virginia, Miami, especially Miami, because of its low altitude, all of them would be destroyed. Even South America, even the east coast of South America. Now, we don't have much warning, actually, because even the buoys out there, the buoys can detect a tsunami, but you've got, 8 hours? That's not enough time. It's going to be less than 8 hours. If people are asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning, who's going to tell them? What sirens are going to wake them up and say, hey, there's a tsunami coming? They won't even know what the siren means if the sirens sound. They won't even wonder to figure, well, there's a fire, or is it a tornado, or what's going on here?
Well,
they'll be dead before they even get out of their beds.
Well, yeah, and I'll tell you something else, John, that most people, and I know this here, when there is a tornado warning or something along them lines, most people say, it's never happens, it's not going to happen. And they're crazy for thinking that because it happens.
That's right. A lot of people have been saved, and I've seen it on the Weather Channel, because they were awakened by their weather radio, or if they were lucky enough to have the TV on, they got a warning, and they were saved because they rushed down to the basement where they went to an center closet under the stairwell. In my basement, I have a closet area. Well, it's encased in sheetrock, which is not much. Yeah. But at least it's an inner room. They went down there and they survived when the rest of the house was collapsed. So yeah, you have to have a weather radio. I have to set my weather radio, which I haven't done yet, to the right channel and all that. It stays on constantly, but it doesn't make any sound until there's an emergency, and then it starts squawking. So you got to do things like that. And also, the flooding, Michael, what you can do and what I need to do, I'm in pretty good altitude, but for those people, and there are many of them across the country who are susceptible to flooding, epic flooding, and they should have rafts. They should have pontoon rafts or any kind of flotation devices, even those life vests, that are activated and inflated by a CO2 cartridge. You pull the cord and the cartridge instantly inflates the raft. We talked about this in the last show that we had together, Michael, where people should have these in their car, because you could find yourself, even the safest driver who turns around not to drown, can find himself in a flash flood in a matter of minutes. The car's floating. He's about to die. And he has to get out of the car, so, roll down the window before the battery is killed by the flooding, and put on your life vest and get out of there. That could save your life just by carrying a couple of life vests in the car for you and your passengers. Things like that. So we have to think proactively about flooding, avoiding floods, and all kinds of disasters.
Yeah, absolutely, we do.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. I paused for a moment because I heard a little static in the headphones, and I'll be damned if it didn't sound just like that water again. I thought it was happening again, but no, it's just something in the headphones. Thank God. But folks, I've sent over Ira a few pictures. Two of them are from right now, from in the studio. And at some point, I think he'll throw them in there if he gets around to it. He's busy, so he might or he might not. I can't do it right now, so otherwise I would. But I do have more pictures of like Planet X and these UFO pics too that have been being worked on. I'll get those ready for tomorrow night so I could share them in the chat room as well. And John, we have another call here, so I'm gonna take it. I'm trying here. Okay, there we go. 814 area code. Who we got? Where are you calling from?
This is Chuck from Meadville, Pennsylvania.
Well, welcome aboard, Chuck.
Hi, Chuck.
Yeah, I just wanted to... Hi, how you doing, John?
Fine, thanks.
Say hi to you and Michael and Ira on the other line if he's still there. If not, he's in the background somewhere.
He actually hung up, but yeah, thanks for the call too, Ira.
Anyhow, I just wanted to mention a little bit more proof on your thing. The Illuminati people, or whatever you want to call them, celebrate this black sun. And they're not talking about our sun going dark or anything like that. And also, a picture of Isis, or a statue of Isis, that goddess from Egypt or whatever she's from, has a set of bull horns, kind of like the Taurus bull, with a black sun in the center. Some people call it other things, whatever, energy or whatever. Basically, it's the black sun, or what you're talking about is, the nemesis, or whatever you want to call it, that star that's coming into our system. And I was listening on, it's kind of, coincidental, or if you want to call it coincidence, another show that was talking about Planet X, and it's supposed to be from the tribulationtechnow.org by the non-human entities.
Would you repeat the name of that website again?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that's where it came from, but that's what it was listed underneath. Tribulation or tac now.org. And it was aired by the non-human entities. And I didn't get the guy's name, and I tried to go back to get it, but I can't get the thing to restart. And it was aired supposedly December 3rd of this year. And he mentioned about it going to be coming through the Taurus bullhorns. Of course, we're talking the star system. And then I see that picture or that statue of Isis with the bullhorns and the black sun in the middle. And like I say, coincidence, maybe once, but this twice. And then I click back to your show earlier than normal because I listen to Hagman also. Uh-huh. And you come on the air about this, and I'm going, 3 times in a row talking about this. And it just so happens, I page through the internet all day. I'm on disability, so I ain't got nothing better to do. But it's really something different.
I remember seeing, occult, and maybe Michael, too, has seen occult references to Planet X. And You know, that reminds me that they, even going back into ancient history, they called it the evil elite in ancient times, called it Marduk, this Planet X, which was, they considered it a god. And if you look at the great archaeologists and anthropologists who just passed away, Zechariah Sitchin, he mentions that kind of he has those references in his book, The 12th Planet, where he talks about Marduk and the diabolical elite actually have, I haven't studied it real intensely, but there's so much occult in their rituals, which they believe gives them power. And this could be one of them. Marduk is what they worship. They make it an object of worship as they worship Satan in order to keep their power, and in order that they believe, falsely, will protect them if they worship these evil occult entities who they falsely believe represent this great dwarf star, which I know is being brought in by God. So you're right. I mean, there are occult references that we need to study, because when we see the diabolical ruling elite's occult references today, we then get clues as to what they're up to and what they're expecting, and how that would jibe with what we're seeing coming in, and how that would jibe with what the astronomers, the independent astronomers at the great observatory, the largest observatory on planet Earth, have just recently reported. And this is the big news of this show, is that Planet X, they say Planet X has been sighted. And that reminds me, your question reminds me that what happened was there was to show me greater evidence and to support their finding, their sighting of this Planet X at the Atacama Large Meter Array, that's ALMA as an acronym, observatory in Chile. What gives greater support to the observers and to students of this subject is that the diabolical ruling elite instantly reacted with a hatchet job, a hit piece, a critical, snide, sloppy slander, smear of the sighting by these astronomers. And that leads you to believe that there's no reason for the elite in their organ of disinformation, the Washington Post. There's no reason
first
for
thing
them
to
to
discredit
discredit. Why should they discredit it?
All right. Well, that's what they do first. They try to discredit. If not, they try to warn. And then if not, well, we all know what follows after that. It's not worth talking about because no one's around to hear it then. But
Right.
That's right. Yeah, so they know that they're going underground. The evidence is all there. The London Daily Mail has reported that they are going deep into the bowels of Cheyenne Mountain in their great, vast underground city there, and also in the bowels of Mount Weather in West Virginia. They're descending underground. Alex Jones had some emergency reports, which I have put on my YouTube channel and my Vimeo channel, where Alex Jones got under. He said, look, this is an emergency report. He made two of them in this year, 2015. One emergency report in June, I believe, and then another in September, October, yeah. And he said, this is my second emergency report, verifying that the elite are going underground. They're buying redoubts and underground habitations in New Zealand, and they're disappearing, and something's going on here. I don't know what it is. And, of course, you can expect a nuclear war. You can expect a major war because they're like saboteurs, these diabolical ruling elite. They will throw a grenade into a crowd, and they'll duck for cover after they throw it, waiting for the explosion and making sure that they themselves are safe. That's what they're going to do with this nuclear war that they're planning. They're going underground. They don't want to be nuked. And the way they're going to escape the nuclear war is to be underground where they're protected. I have information from a renegade CIA person. I think I can mention her name, and her name's on the internet already. It's Dr. Susan Arrigo, Arrigo. A number of years ago, a journalist. Hold on 1 second, please.
Okay, and Ira's back with us as well. So, was that John who said hold on? Oh, okay.
I'm back. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's...
I had to leave the phone. I would say about 2007. I would say about 7 years ago. A journalist friend of mine told me that she was contacted by this Dr. Susan Arrigo, who used to be with the CIA, and she had told her Dr. Susan Arrigo was a renegade. She had left the CIA, and I think she was essentially on the run. I hope she's still alive. She had told us that they were trying to start a war in Iran by provoking Iran with bombings and things like that, or terrorist acts, and that they were going to trigger this war. It was going to be a nuclear war, but they were prepared. The diabolical ruling elite were prepared to go underground to escape the nuclear disaster above ground. Mm-hmm. And then they were going to come up after the dust had cleared and the radioactive fallout was still around, but everything else was the world would be devastated by a nuclear winter, and there would be maybe just a small remnant of humankind left alive. They would come up, ascend from their underground cities, and I was told then that the elite have this technology, which I believe because I've seen other reports of it, technology where they can actually decontaminate and neutralize radioactive fallout, radioactive contamination in a small area of the Earth.
And John, I'll say this. I would think that these underground facilities, these bunkers, and they got so much under there. There's tunnels, roads, cities, farms, you name it. And I think much of this is to survive something like a nuclear war. I think they'd be naive to think that they can survive something like a Planet X.
No, they won't.
Yeah, because
in fact, you're right, Michael. Because see, they have no other choice. This is what I've always said. People say, "Well, how could this be true? Why are they going underground if they can't survive underground?" Well, they have no choice. They've been thinking about going into the International Space Station to go up in space for a time, but you're going to get fried up in space because there's going to be so much electrical discharge from the plasma-drenched objects coming in, from the plasma discharges that are excited within our solar system when this object comes in, that anything like satellites are going to get zapped and fried, vaporized, and it's going to be unsafe there. They know that. Their scientists tell them that. They have to go underground because, you see, they know that Earth's surface is going to get unbearably hot, such that life will be destroyed. A great amount of life will be destroyed. So they have no choice but to go underground where it's very unsafe. But yet, if they stay on ground, they'll be fried. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say Earth is already getting hot. The supposed global warming thing, the electromagnetic is already getting heated up. This has happened before in history, everything else. And the Indians did survive before. They were taken underground by some kind of entity, but they were brought back up. But that was a different time. It was during the flood, I guess, or whatever.
And what I'm finding, I'm sorry, Ira, one thing here. What I'm finding, though, with this whole the Earth is warming thing is that they've refused to follow any of the data from the satellite images, which actually show that the Earth hasn't warmed at all in 25 years. And I mean, this is real. You could go, I'm not saying which one's more accurate, but I would think the satellites are. What do you think, Ira?
Well, I was just going to add in that, yeah, you're correct on the fact that Native Americans talk about the fact that they were saved by going underground. They actually went underground. They were prompted to go underground by the Great Spirit, and they were taken care of underground by what they refer to as the ant people. And then when the time came to be able to come back up and rebirth up into the new world, basically, the ant people helped them to get up and start surviving. So just kind of an interesting little toss out there.
Yeah, the praying
the
mantis.
American Indians were very spiritual, and even though they knew nothing about the Bible, they were so close to the creation and to nature that they actually could feel the presence of God, many of them. And as a result, I think they were protected by God, spirits of God, angels. This has happened in the past where people chosen by God, or most people are chosen by God, are protected. So, yeah, I believe that the Indians were protected.
All right. Anything else, caller?
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you for taking my call, and you have a good night.
Absolutely.
Thanks for the info.
Yeah, thank you very much for the call, and thank you for listening. And Ira, anything else?
Yeah. The reason why I was calling back actually was when you were talking about the elites in regards to the sun and the black sun and all that kind of stuff. It reminded me actually of a bit of research that I've done where a lot of these different corporations and other entity out there, they have this big focus on their symbology being related to the sun. And from what I can find out, basically it's kind of like in regards to something that they call the dawning of the new sun, or the dawning of the new day, basically, or the new dawn. And I wonder if there is a relation to this stuff to what you're discussing here with the Planet X and all of the other things that are going on with it, basically.
Well, let's see now. The new sun, according to the Bible, prophecy given by the Son of God, the sun will become, this is in the book of Revelation now, at some point, the sun will become extremely hot, blazing hot, such that everyone on the surface will be scrambling to go underground to escape the heat. And it will eventually come. The destruction of the earth will ramp up to such a point in so many disastrous ways, with earthquakes, etc., that virtually no life will be able to exist except. And this is what I prayed about, because it has to be understood through spiritual prayer and communion with God. In the Bible, it's not specifically stated in the book of Revelation, but the ones who will survive the destruction of the earth are the ones who will be taken up at the very end, when the earth undergoes complete destruction. Now, taken up would be in terms of the spirit, not the body. The body would be left behind, and the spirit would be taken up in an instant, in a twinkling of an eye, according to the scriptures. And that can happen when, for example, we have electricity, a lightning bolt, a transmission of energy occurs at the speed of light. Radio waves travel at the speed of light. The spirit of the body, I infer and intuitively feel that the spirit of the body transmits upward toward God at a particular time in our lives when the life is over. It's transmitted upward at the speed of light. And those are the ones who survive. Their spirits survive. Their bodies left behind, like a cocoon of a butterfly leaving the cocoon. Mm-hmm. And they take on a new body. I know it's strange to us because we don't experience this in our physical life, but this is the metaphysics that are being proven, being shown by advanced studies, such as the study of other dimensions and the spirit of the body. It's just amazing. But that reminds me of actually videotaped these true stories from a series that I can no longer find on the Destination America channel.
Okay,
Thank goodness I
John,
recorded
hold that thought for a moment, just for a moment. We got to take our last break. And so, gentlemen, both of you, hang on, and we'll come back and we'll pick right back up where we left off. But I do have to take this break because we're getting down on time. So, folks, this is Late Night in the Midlands. My guest is John DiNardo. We've also got Ira on the line. We'll get back to him as soon as we get back from this break. Folks, if you haven't become a late nighter, do it. We're real. What can I say? And we've got plenty of live shows on this network as well. And we're going to be adding more, as a matter of fact, as we head into the new year. It's getting really good here. So become a late nighter. Support what we do here so we can support those who help us. And let's keep this train rolling. And, well, again, we'll be back in just a few moments. And, so let's get back to it with my guest, John DiNardo. And I hope you'll continue to support us at latenightinthemidlands.com. John, so you say that they said they found it. This is a recent report?
Yes, it was earlier this month. In fact, just maybe about a week or two ago. All you have to do is go to your search engine and type in the acronym ALMA, which stands for Atacama, that's A-T-A-C-A-M-A, A-T-A-C-A-M-A, Atacama. You could type in that word also. Large Meter Array Observatory. Or you could just type in the acronym ALMA, A-L-M-A. That observatory is the largest telescope on planet Earth. It's a radio telescope, which picks up the spectrum, electromagnetic spectrum of the subvisible light energy, the magnetic energy that comes from electromagnetic energy that's emanated from distant objects. When they emit infrared light, for example, infrared is electromagnetic energy. It's of the same type of electromagnetic energy of radio waves and television waves. So this array of 66 antennas, receiving antennas, constitutes the largest telescope on Earth. And they have said in the article, and I can paraphrase it, we think we have discovered Planet X. They actually mentioned it in the article. You'll see it reported in the London Daily Mail, I believe. You can look that up.
Okay.
And so it's out there. Now, the evidence that we see, that they've actually found it, the evidence that I notice, and we all should notice, is that the diabolical ruling elite have instantly, in a knee-jerk reaction, attacked these astronomers, these independent, sincere, honest astronomers who are not tied to any government funding whatsoever. And why would they attack these astronomers unless they were afraid of something? The Washington Post, which is the organ of disinformation of the diabolical ruling elite, it's owned by the Graham family, Catherine Graham, infamous Council on Foreign Relations member. They had this Sarah Kaplan, a sloppy journalist, let's say a hatchet-wielding journalist.
I see. Just to cut in for a second, John. Now, some would say, I have had many tell me, well, NASA, they call any planet that they've just discovered and not given a name, they call it Planet X, and that's what they'll say.
Well, they would say it's a Planet X, but in this case, they said we think we have discovered Planet X.
I see.
And I don't believe anyone that in that insinuation that any newly planet discovered would be called a Planet X. No, I don't believe that, because it's why then would the elite have buried the term Planet X ever since 1983, when the NSA became quite secretive? The diabolical ruling elite who controlled the National Security Agency became so secretive and concerned about reportage regarding Planet X that the name was banned. You did not see that name anymore. So I don't believe that insinuation that the term Planet X refers to any planet generically, newly discovered.
And one other thing I want to run by you, too, because some tell me that if you don't talk about this, then, that's how they could determine whether you're real or not. So, honestly, I'm going to say it, I find it almost laughable, okay? I'm just going to put it out there. I do, and you could say maybe I'm brainwashed, because who knows, maybe I am. But flat Earth, John, they're telling me that the Earth is flat. What say you on that?
The Earth. Who's telling you that the Earth is flat?
There's people who are telling me that if guys like you and I don't talk about flat Earth, then we're not real. So should we be talking about this?
I don't talk about flat Earth. No,
I don't mean to offend anybody out there who does. I'm sorry, but nobody has given me that type of evidence. I get messages from people talking about.
Well, look at the photographs, the films of planet Earth from space, from space and from the International Space Station.
Well, that's just it.
It's proof right there.
I think that it's been canned. I think a long time ago, and I'm not saying it because I don't want to believe it. It's just, I don't know. Somebody sent me a video and says that if this don't convince me, nothing will. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't watch but maybe 8 minutes of it, and I had to turn it off because the guy was it was incredibly just I couldn't watch it. But.
Yeah, you can't. You can't allow you can't allow the disinformation coming from any area. Or at least we can tolerate anyone's free speech, but we also have the right to respond.
Right.
So, for example, we talk about the photographs from space that show that the Earth is not flat. We also, if you stand on the shore and watch a ship going out to sea, does that ship, if you had a telescope, if the Earth were flat, you'd be able to see that ship at great distances away, wouldn't you? But you can't, because the ship appears to sink below the horizon as it gets farther out. Doesn't it? That indicates that there's a curvature to the Earth.
Yeah, I agree. You're not getting no disagreement from me. But there's people who, and they get mad because, I chop them at the bit quick on it because I'll go as far with the Planet X and even bases on the moon, and the moon might be hollow. Okay. I'll go there. But flat Earth, I think it's been proven without a shadow of a doubt that we've got somewhat round rocks floating in space. That's me. If you could prove me wrong, by all means, contact me, but have real evidence, and I know you're not going to have it because it just don't exist, but I'd be glad to entertain it. But it's all it is entertainment for me. Anyways.
At least you give them it gives them the freedom to express themselves.
Well, yeah,
and
exactly.
then just let it go at that. But I wanted to get back to this
Sure.
New York Times landmark article that I began reading from January 30th because I want to present further scientific evidence that this brown dwarf star exists. And the title of the article, again, I'll just go over it briefly, is Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X. They're talking about not a Planet X, but the Planet X, by John Noble Wilford, January 30th, 1983, New York Times. Now, their article states that ever since the 1800s, astronomers noticed perturbations or a plucking of the outer planets Uranus and Neptune from their revolutions around the sun, eccentricities that can only be explained by a large unseen gravitational body pulling at these planets at some point in their revolutionary path around the sun. So quite logical. So they logically theorized that there's a large planet out there, which was discovered in the it was sent out discovered by NASA, which in the way of sending out the Pioneer 10 space probe, which I described before, which was to feel a gravitational pull by this unseen body at some point, at the point where they calculated that this unseen gravitational body existed. And they never told us, because they keep it secret, they never told us the results of the Pioneer 10 trajectory perturbation, which would have proven that the gravitational body indeed was there. We were never told about that. No. Why not? Because they knew that there was a perturbation. They didn't want us to know about Planet X. However, the NSA was not quite as suppressive and didn't have the knowledge at the time to suppress NASA. When NASA in 1983, January, New York Times said, quote, recent calculations by the United States Naval Observatory have confirmed the orbital perturbation exhibited by Uranus and Neptune, which Dr. Thomas C. Van Flandern, an astronomer at the observatory, says could be explained by a single undiscovered planet. He and colleague Dr. Robert Harrington calculate that the 10th planet should be 2 to 5 times more massive than Earth. And incidentally, I don't know why they said that, because it's got to be much, much larger than that, and I'll show you why later on in this article. It should be 2 to 5 times more massive than Earth and have a highly elliptical orbit. That is correct, because we talked about that, like the tennis ball being batted back and forth between two suns on a celestial tennis court. If a tennis ball is batted back and forth, its trajectory is certainly going to have a highly stretched out elliptical orbit going back and forth from one tennis player to the next. Anyway, they say this Dr. Harrington and Dr. Van Flandern say it has a highly elliptical orbit that takes it some 5 billion miles beyond that of Pluto. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is a key quote. This is very important for us to ponder. Takes it 5 billion miles beyond Pluto, hardly next door, but still within the gravitational influence of the sun. So what that means is that if it's within the gravitational influence of the sun at 5 billion miles away, which is where it was back then in 1983, a third of a century ago, it must still be within the gravitational influence of the sun right now, only much closer.
Right.
That is, if it has a highly elliptical orbit, you see. It's got those two facts together. If it has a highly elliptical orbit coming in, and it is within the gravitational influence of the sun, according to basic physics, which is indisputable, it must be continually, right now, at this time, being pulled in by our sun gravitationally. This is an undeniable fact of physics, and I, as a former high school physics teacher, can tell you that. I'm sorry, Michael.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that we've only got a few minutes left. This night has flown by. So if you could spend the next few minutes, obviously at the end, go ahead and plug whatever you'd like. But in the next few minutes, if you could kind of explain to us where it might be and when you expect to get the worst from it.
Well, the astronomers at the Atacama Large Meteor Array in Chile recently, within the last couple weeks, said that it's out near the heliosphere of our solar system, which is way out there beyond Pluto. And I can imagine where it would be out there because it has come in, well, I won't go into details because we don't have a lot of time, but it has come in below the ecliptic, according to Dr. Harrington, the late and murdered Dr. Robert S. Harrington. I think we could say that safely because many observers have shown us that Dr. Harrington was about to reveal to the world that he had sighted this object, and it was indeed coming toward our solar system, and that's why they killed him. He died of cancer very quickly when he had promised to tell the world reveal his telescopic findings, which were being processed. Okay, so Dr. Harrington was murdered. Anyway, he said it comes in from the south below our ecliptic plane, which means it's going to overshoot the sun and go out and make a huge U-turn underneath the ecliptic and up and over the planets, which is way out there near the heliosphere. So I can imagine why it would make such a huge U-turn. It would slow down in that U-turn, just like a car slows down in its U-turn. But then as the sun begins to pull it back again over the top of the ecliptic plane, toward the sun again, passing over Earth's orbit, passing over the outer planet's orbit, passing over, that's where it seems to be about ready to do now. It's about ready to pass over the top of the orbital paths of the outer planets, and then come in over the top of the orbital paths of the inner planets, Mars, Earth, Venus, Mercury, and the Sun, etc. And as it does, it's going to become close enough to cause gravitational and magnetic molestations of planet Earth. Anyway, Dr. Morita was murdered. I got to tell you this is so key. Okay. Dr. Morita was a famed, eminent world-class astronomer from Japan. Several years ago, when the Atacama, the ALMA observatory, which we're talking about now, which just released this report of sighting Planet X, that was being constructed. The diabolical ruling elite were so concerned about these independent astronomers finding Planet X. You know what they did? They actually had Dr. Morita, the chief astronomer of the ALMA observatory under construction, they had him beaten to death to terrorize. You could see the article. Just look up Morita, Morita. Do a search.
I don't doubt
that name, along with ALMA, ALMA Observatory. Just type in those words, Morita, ALMA Observatory, and you'll find out he was beaten to death.
And John, we can go about another 5-10 minutes over if need be. I don't want to rush you. I want to know what we can. So, but I wanted to add to that and say that these a lot of these holistic healers, along with scientists and God knows who else, have been getting knocked off.
Exactly, that's a good point. Dr. Teresa Sievers, a wonderful, beautiful physician in Florida, was beaten to death recently, this year, 2015. And Dr. Jeffrey Bradstreet was shot to death, shot in the chest and thrown into the river by these diabolical ruling elite from Big Pharma, etc., because of natural findings that they were coming up with. I don't know the exact details of it, but it related to cancer cures. And that's what they do. They beat Dr. Sievers to death, this beautiful woman. When they do that, they do it to terrorize others. You see, if the person just dies of a natural causes, they could do that too. They can give them cancer. But they want to terrorize everyone else who might speak out. And that's what they did with Dr. Morita, the chief astronomer of the under construction at that time ALMA Observatory. And they figured, well, we're going to terrorize all these other astronomers from around the world, from various nations that were joining together at the ALMA Observatory. Astronomers from Korea, from Japan, from the U.S., from other countries too. Independent astronomers. The diabolical ruling elite hate that because they don't want the public to know, or when the public knows that this planet is coming in to cause great devastation to Earth, then people lose their fear and obedience to the diabolical ruling elite, and they become independent and to go into survival mode, which is what we should all be doing right now. The elite don't want us to do that. They want to go underground and watch us die.
And on the 28th, I'm actually, you brought up survival. I'm actually doing a show on the 28th with a guest who's been on the show before, but we didn't talk about survival. He's coming on to discuss survival, Richard Lowell Jr. He'll be coming on to discuss surviving whatever might come in the next year, because it's picking up. And, that's all I'm going to say. I've told people World War III had already started, and, it would appear that I was right. I mean, look, there's more and more conflict happening, and, it's, who knows what could happen. Suitcase nukes, and I ain't not trying to scare anybody. I'm just saying that, these are very real possibilities, and everybody, a lot of times people think, well, everything's fake, it's all made up. And I'll tell you what, you're giving the cabal too much credit, because they will sacrifice you, they will blow you up or shoot you to make a point and to get their agenda ahead. And so you should never underestimate. While an event might be staged per se, they may be planning on it, they're still killing people. I mean, don't think that they don't.
Exactly. And the brave, thoughtful, insightful people will believe us and are believing us, and they will prepare. And we leave the fearful, the ones who have cognitive dissonance, who do not want to believe the truth because they're afraid. They fall by the wayside. We don't care about them. We care about the people who do care and who believe it and want to warn others. So that's fine. We don't need 100% acceptance. We just need the good people, like the Marine Corps. We need a few good men. Well, we're looking for all those good people with good hearts. And real quickly, if we have a minute, I just wanted to show you more evidence from the New York Times article of 1983, where these astronomers, Dr. Harrington, who was murdered by the diabolical ruling elite because he was about to announce his findings, his sightings in 1993. Dr. Harrington and others, they're saying, quote, more credence was given to the hypothesis that a brown dwarf star accounts for this mysterious pulling force on the outer planets. Okay, so there you go, right there. All the astronomers of the day of 1983 say that this is probably a brown dwarf star. Now, if you look at the definition of a brown dwarf star in any astronomy book, you can find it on the internet. The puniest brown dwarf star is about at least 1,000 Earth masses. Imagine that, 1,000 Earth masses, 1,000 Earths clumped together. And when it comes by, so now the scientists tell us it's probably a brown dwarf star. All the people who are reporting on it today, many of them are scientists, are saying it's a brown dwarf star. The astronomers at Chile, they tried to intimidate by beating to death the lead astronomer, but it hasn't worked yet. They report that it's probably a brown dwarf star. You could check out this latest report, and this latest report is really the powerful impetus for us to start preparing, because it's being cited, and it's going to be cited by other observatories. It's bee swarm. The bee swarm from this brown dwarf beehive is coming in right now. That's the first danger we have to face, is the bee swarm surrounding the beehive. Now, this bee swarm consists of comets, asteroids, and meteors. Earth is in danger, great danger of asteroids right now. I mean, they cannot even hide the danger anymore. You're hearing it all over the place. You're hearing it on all the science channels that we are threatened by asteroids. And they try to cover it up with such, for the layman who doesn't understand. For those of us who understand, we could see their lies. I was looking at a H2 History Channel report on the asteroid threat. In fact, I video or DVD recorded it. And what they're saying in there is, gee, there's more asteroids in our solar system than we thought. Well, that's a lie. I mean, the fact is that they knew there were a certain density of asteroids for many, many decades. And now the number of asteroids has increased drastically. They're not telling you that. They're lying in a feeble way with a sloppy lie that that must be noticed by anyone who studies the subject. That it's not that they just never noticed the asteroids before. It's just that the density of asteroids has drastically increased in recent years, and that's because this beehive is coming into our solar system, being pulled in by our sun's great gravitational force field, and the bee swarm around it is becoming ever dense. And you watch, we're seeing more strikes, more meteor strikes. We had a massive meteor strike in the nation of Iran back in July. That was covered up by the media. I proved that it was covered up in my reports. I posted numerous reports to prove it. They said one person, even related, a wife of a Planet X researcher, said, "Oh, that's a hoax. There was no meteor strike in Iran." And I proved that she was wrong by posting the actual videotape that I found on YouTube of Iranian journalists going into the field where the meteor struck, and they were pulling the asteroid out of the ground and holding it right up to the camera. And of course it was reported in the Italian press, but you could not find it anywhere in the U.S. And just because this wife of this Planet X researcher, she couldn't find it, she declared that it doesn't exist just because she couldn't find evidence of the meteor strike. I proved it by showing her the video evidence, and I posted it in one of my articles, one of my reports. Well, the point is that meteors are striking Earth more frequently now, and we're in danger of being struck by an asteroid. When that happens, you have dust clouds, you have dislocation of society. Okay, the bottom line is prepare. Get your water. Now, I have so many empty water bottles that I have collected. My wife is frustrated because I have all these empty water plastic bottles from ketchup, soda. I mean, I don't drink soda, but once in a while, they buy juice bottles. Any plastic bottle, I rinse it out, fill it up with water, stack it up in my basement. And that's what you got to do, because lack of water is the first thing that will cause death.
Well, yeah, I mean, quicker than not having food, that's
exactly.
for sure. So, but John, we are getting down low on time here, and I don't want to screw the schedule up too bad on Ira. We're kind of cutting into the next show right now, but I thank you so much for being here tonight, and of course we'll kick off another show in 2016. That's for sure. Probably somewhere near the end of January, maybe we could do this again, and maybe sooner. Depends. I mean, because if somebody cancels out, you and a few others are usually the first ones I contact to bring back in. So
I'm happy to have been with you and your audience, Michael.
Thank you. And anything you want to get out there before we finish up tonight?
No, that's all. I think we've cut into enough time already. I've said it all, and we'll talk more about survival. That's the main thing. And spiritual connection to God, who can protect us.
And where would you suggest people go for the best survival tips? I mean, you've been around, you look into this stuff. Where would you send people? There's
so many. I would say just about any of them. Just pick out a variety of survival tips from a variety of survival sources, because we've got so many disasters, such as flooding and tornado protection, etc. Look at all the disasters that we are now prone to feeling, and you can then begin to plan for these disasters with a variety of preparations, mainly food and water. Water is the main thing. Just fill up, common sense, fill up water bottles, get essential oils for health, and get silver germicide to prevent disease along with your essential oils. But the water and the storable foods and seeds are so important.
Absolutely. Well, John, thank you again. And until next time, have a very Merry Christmas and a really, really good New Year. 2016 is upon us.
Thank you, Michael. My best wishes to you and your audience.
All right, and right back to you and yours, John. Thank you so much. All right, folks, so that's John DiNardo, and
that we have, showing that indeed this huge brown dwarf star has been detected, not only now but in the past, and is naturally, understandably being pulled in by our sun's great gravitational force field. Our sun is like a celestial fisherman. Our sun's mass is incredibly great. Our sun's mass is equivalent to nearly 1/3 of a million Earth masses. And as we know, according to our own experience every day with gravity, and according to Sir Isaac Newton's universal law of gravitation, the greater the mass of a body, the greater its gravitational pull. So this is why Planet X is coming in. It's not an accident. It doesn't happen to be accidentally coming in. It is a brown dwarf star, of which many are out there in deep space. And this particular brown dwarf star has gotten close enough to our solar system that it has impinged on Earth's, on our solar system's distant outlying borders of our solar system's gravitational force field. And as you know, when an object gets within a force field, whether it be a gravitational force field or a magnetic force field, that object is going to be pulled in and it will be accelerated, which is happening now. So this has been expected. I have studied this subject, and many others have studied this subject of Planet X for 15 years or more. I would say the first time I heard about it was in 2002, and I had a spiritual awakening. You know, it was an intuition spiritually, I believe from God, that this is true. This Planet X, even though I knew nothing about it, entering a large body, entering our solar system, which would cause gravitational molestations of Earth at distances of several million miles away as it passes by. I had realized intuitively that this was true, and without having studied it. But then the more I studied it, the more I realized from a scientific term, Planet X. Welcome back, Michael.
Yeah, I have one of those refrigerators that apparently is smart, I guess, and well, it has a water compartment where it'll give you water. Well, it was giving water, all right. I thought I heard something, and I wasn't sure. I'm glad I caught it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Glad it worked out okay for you.
So we're good, because if I didn't catch it in time, it would have been coming downhill to the studio shortly.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, I heard so. It's all good now. I did
Great.
a super speedy cleanup, and here we are. So continue.
Okay. Well, anyway, so in this New York Times, you know what I'm going to do for credibility? I'm going to read some clips from it, but I don't want to take too much time because I know there's so many avenues or channels of fields of information that we can talk about that all converge to indicate that this brown dwarf star is indeed entering our solar system. So I'll just touch on this.
Okay.
This is Sunday, January 30th, 1983. I have the actual photocopy of the article, which I posted on the internet. It's widely available, so that people cannot, skeptics cannot say, well, that's just you made up the text of it, but where's the actual article? I have it photocopied with a photograph in the article of the U.S. and Dutch technicians preparing the infrared astronomical satellite before its launch in January of 1983. United Press International from the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I'll just read a bit. The title is January 30th, 1983, Clues Get Warm in the Search for Planet X by John Noble Wilford of the New York Times. Quote, something out there beyond the farthest reaches of the known solar system seems to be tugging at Uranus and Neptune. Some gravitational force keeps perturbing the two giant planets, causing irregularities in their orbits. The force suggests a presence far away and unseen, a large object that may be the long-sought Planet X. So what they're saying is that there's a gravitational pull on the outer gas giants, Uranus and Neptune, and astronomers know that only a large body could cause the irregularities or perturbations or pluckings out of their ruling elite, or there have been reports from credible, reputable newspapers such as the London Daily Mail that the elite are going underground. And these reports have been coming out throughout this year of 2015. So we know things are happening. They're getting ready for a war. A war is always cooked up whenever there is something catastrophic about to happen, such as a planned financial collapse.
John, I'm going to leave you you just keep going ahead with this. I got to leave the mic for a few minutes. I kind of got a flood in the other room I need to take care of.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, please, I hope everything works out well
okay,
for you.
I'll be right back. All right.
All right.
But go right ahead.
Okay, so we see the signs all around us that something drastic is about to happen, and we should not be worried. If we have trust in God, we should now prepare calmly, and because I expect, and many observers who have been studying this situation of not only Planet X, but the world affairs and the cataclysms of the precipices that we appear to be at right now in terms of world politics, the world economy, world war, social upheaval, etc. So we should be preparing for dislocations in our civilizations, such as loss of electrical power. That possible loss of electrical power over major regions of the earth has been discussed and has been of great concern to many people. Ted Koppel, the famous news reporter. Of course, news reporters who are currently in the news cannot be relied upon because their speeches and thoughts are controlled. However, people like Ted Koppel, who have long since retired, they can speak out. And Ted Koppel has written a book warning that we can expect widespread and long protracted power outages. So we should get prepared for that now. Planet X has been sighted. I'm quite sure. I intend to try to go through, in the limited time we have, the vast array of evidence. Hello.
Good evening, John. This is Michael Vera with Late Night in the Midlands. How are you?
Fine. Hi, Michael. I'm glad to be with you and your audience.
Whoa, it's great to have you back, my friend. I was just telling everybody a little bit about you and telling them that you're amongst my top researchers when it comes to this topic. So I appreciate it.
Well, that's an honor. Thanks so much, Michael.
Absolutely. So, John, where would you like to start tonight?
The latest news we have is from the Atacama Large Meter Submillimeter Array Telescope in Chile. It's the largest telescope on planet Earth. It's a radio telescope capable of detecting not only visible light, but, as you know, light is just one particular frequency spectrum, portion of the frequency band of all electromagnetic energy. Radio waves are also the same identical type of electromagnetic energy as light. And gamma rays are also the same type of electromagnetic energy. The only difference is that they all vibrate or oscillate at different frequencies. That is the different number of cycles per second. So because this telescope is a radio telescope, it's able to detect not only visible light, but sub-visible light, such as infrared, which is what Planet X emits right now. And this is why it's so key. Not only is it capable of sighting distant objects, but it's also able to see non-light emitting objects. Well, the Atacama large meter submillimeter array extending more than 3 miles high into the sky in Chile has just reported that they have detected what is very possibly Planet X. And the diabolical ruling elite are quite upset. They don't know what to do. They've always known that somebody was going to blow the lid off of their secret. They're, in fact, the diabolical ruling and logical basis of study. It is indeed true. And the more you study it, the more you realize, the more sounder your belief becomes. There are so many fields of evidence that show us, all pointing, converging, agreeing, overlapping, intersecting one another, indicating that this brown dwarf star is indeed coming into our solar system. There is the field of the Bible. Not only the Holy Bible, but other religious texts have prophesied a large object, a great devastation coming into our solar system, wreaking havoc upon planet Earth. That's the religious aspect of the evidence. There's also the scientific aspect of it. Scientifically, this object, I can take you back to the prime evidence supporting this, the belief that this object is indeed exists and it's indeed being pulled in by our sun, and that is the launching by our U.S. government in conjunction with the government of the Netherlands and Great Britain in 1983, nearly a third of a century ago, where they were launching this infrared astronomical satellite. And I have the New York Times landmark report on the launching of that satellite. At that time, they were not muzzled. The astronomers and astrophysicists of that day were actually proud to declare to the world that they were launching this infrared, because infrared, this telescope was designed to detect infrared light, not visible light. And they were proud to herald the launching of it in the New York Times article. I have it right in front of me. And it's a very long article, but it's extremely informative. What they're saying in the article is that then in January 30th, 1983 to be exact, the infrared astronomical satellite was being launched, quote, to detect the long-sought planet X.
I'm
so they
back.
actually were free to use the